Hey everyone, it's Mark. I'm here to help you take control of your life through personal development, smart money habits, and entrepreneurship. If those things sound good to you, then please let me know by clicking the like and subscribe buttons down below. Now, let's talk about the shocking news about how people are using their credit cards during the coronavirus pandemic. So I just picked up my copy of the Wall Street Journal. As you can see, here's the date today, Monday, August 3rd. And on the bottom of the first page, there was a shocking headline that totally caught me by surprise. I want to share it with you here. I'll put it up on the screen. As you can see, it says on the title, "Debt on Credit Cards Falls Amid Pandemic." So that blew my mind because, first of all, a lot of people, millions in fact, have been either laid off, they've been furloughed. So to see the total volume of credit card debt, at least here in the States, fall during COVID-19 is actually very surprising when you first hear about it. But when you dig into the details and you start to see why that is, it starts to make a lot more sense. So let's dive into the article right now. So as you guys can see from this small snippet as the article begins on the first page here, it says, when unemployment soared this spring at the start of the coronavirus lockdowns, credit card debt and delinquencies were widely expected to surge as struggling households borrowed more to make ends meet. And so that's the part we would initially expect, right? Incomes drop, people are furloughed, they're out of work, yet those bills still keep coming in. You still gotta pay your rent, your utilities, you gotta buy food, all these things. For most people, those bills have not stopped yet. So how is it that with no income, credit card debt is actually falling? We'd expect it to actually increase. Let's keep reading. Instead, amid the deepest economic crisis since the Great Depression, the opposite happened. Credit card debt in the US and other advanced economies has fallen. Fewer people are late on their credit card payments. Consumer demand for new borrowing through credit cards, personal loans, even pawn shops is down sharply. Now I'll pivot over here to the graph where you can see total outstanding US credit card debt from March through June and then going into July. And it's the, on the vertical axis, it's the total amount of billions of dollars of credit card debt. So back in March, we were around $900 billion or so. And as you can see, that fall off started to occur between March and April, during the early phase of the COVID-19 outbreak, and then it dropped sharply between April and May, and then continued on into June and July, where it's starting to plateau a little bit. People are literally taking their credit card debt and eating it for lunch. And that's a really good thing. Now we'll see if that flat part of the curve actually continues as we move into the tail end of Q3 and then into the last quarter of the year. Of course, we gotta wait for the September, October reports from Wall Street Journal and other publications to come out to actually see what that data will look like. Now let's dive into some of the reasons why this is actually occurring. So as we continue our read here, it says the main reason, according to economists and financial executives, is government stimulus programs launched in the US and other advanced economies that have worked unexpectedly well. The flood of money, along with debt relief measures such as deferred mortgage and student loan payments, have stabilized the finances of many households and even left some in better shape than before the pandemic, at least for now. So as I'm sure many of you are aware that some people are actually making more money during their unemployment phase than when they were actually employed. So that's a whole nother type of discussion to have in a different video. But nonetheless, what's interesting here is that because of the stimulus that has been issued out across the nation, there's been an influx of money for a lot of people. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the funds are sufficient to support your lifestyle for months on end. By no means is that the case, but it seems like people are actually using that influx of cash to do good things and put themselves in a better position. Rather than going to Best Buy and buying a big screen TV, although I'm sure some people did that, other people seem to be using it to perhaps pay down credit card debt and improve their financial situation as much as possible during this phase. Let's keep reading. We're not seeing consumers increase credit card balances. In fact, they're continuing to pay down balances, said Peter Maynard, Senior Vice President at Equifax, the credit reporting firm that tracks consumer borrowing. Then we'll move on over here for another quote from one of the executives at Discover. The cardholder base, given the level of economic distress, has held up remarkably well, said Discover Financial Services Chief Executive Roger Hochschild. Without a doubt, government help is helping people meet their obligations. In the US, total outstanding credit card debt fell by 11% or $100 billion between February and the end of June, according to Equifax. April was the largest monthly drop in revolving credit on record, while May was the second largest, according to Federal Reserve data. Personal loan originations were down by a third in mid-May compared with the beginning of March, according to Equifax. Now, just a few months ago, banks started putting aside billions and billions of dollars to set themselves up for potential defaults on all these loans that are outstanding. So if people rack up debt, and they default on their loans, the credit card companies would have to do something about that. So by putting aside a ton of money in reserves to cover those delinquent payments and outstanding liabilities that cannot be paid by people, they had to do so to keep themselves safe. Yet so far, all this preparation for this massive deal, this massive explosion, if you will, of delinquencies and non-payments of accounts hasn't quite happened yet. Now, as I make this video in the first week of August 2020, there are roughly 18 million Americans who are currently unemployed. Now, here's the thing. A lot of states are starting to re-lock down their economies to a certain degree based upon the total number of COVID-19 cases and deaths. The additional unemployment benefits expired on July 31st, just a few days ago. So now people are receiving less money during their unemployment, and states are starting to roll back again. So we'll have to see how this all shakes out. But if economies start to close, at least at the state or local levels, to a certain degree, that's going to harm a lot of businesses. People don't have as much money coming in anymore. They can't spend. If you can't spend, that hurts the small businesses. If businesses don't have revenue, they can't employ people. And if businesses don't have money to employ people, then unemployment continues to be a huge problem. It's all connected, of course. Part of the decline in credit card debt is the result of people spending less on their cards because of restrictions imposed during lockdowns. Lenders have also tightened their underwriting standards. So that part at least does make perfect sense. As a lot of businesses are shut down right now, either temporarily or permanently, people have fewer options to go out and go shopping. And then you combine that with these stricter underwriting standards and it makes even more sense. All that means is that a lot of the major banks out there who issue credit cards, other personal loans, etc., are being a lot more picky about who they give credit to. For example, they might be requiring higher credit scores and other factors that they normally would not have in place in the past. As an example, some banks might say, hey, for this card, we need people to have a score of 670 or better in terms of their FICO score. But now during this whole COVID economic situation, maybe now they're requiring 700 or better to get the same card. Now here's where things get even more interesting. But credit card debt has continued to fall even as lockdowns were relaxed in May and June and retail spending rebounded. Data from credit card companies indicate that the pandemic has spurred a shift away from credit cards toward debit card purchases across spending categories, in part due to stimulus payments. So as small business owners got their hands on PPP loans, as consumers got their hands on the $1,200 initial stimulus checks, that's new money in for them to be able to use and spend as they need. And that money goes into your checking account for most people. And what is the gateway to your checking account? Your debit card. So it seems like wherever the money went, in other words, the stimulus check goes to your checking account, that's what people want to get access to. And how do you access your checking account? Through your debit card. So by default, people are going to their debit cards instead of their credit card because that's where their money is. So now we're starting to see a bigger picture of how all this is playing out. Credit card spending and credit card debt is decreasing in the US and other economies as well, but debit card spending is actually going up. So for all you people out there who are using cash, you're using your debit cards, writing a check, whatever it may be, and relying on cash to pay for your absolute necessities during this time, I congratulate you, I commend you. That's a very good habit to be building right now, and not use credit cards with their 16, 18, or higher percent interest rates, which would hurt you even more. But for those of you out there who are financially responsible and use credit cards to pay for things that you do have the money for and pay your balance in full each month, you've built up that habit and you use credit cards like a debit card, then I do want to remind you to use those credit cards as often as you can and not carry a balance. It's a much, much smarter option, but I only recommend that to people who are truly financially responsible. If you use credit cards and you carry a balance month after month and you're hurting yourself by paying interest charges, then those interest charges will likely be more expensive than the rewards you would earn from a rewards credit card. So if you're not yet at the point where you treat a credit card like a debit card, then just stay with cash for now. You're doing a very good thing to help yourself now, which will then help you in the future to not rack up any debt. I hope you found today's video to be interesting, somewhat informative, and insightful as to the actual spending habits and consumer behavior, at least here in America. I always find it interesting to see how people use their credit cards, what they spend on, what are the current debt levels, and all those things that drive us to use our cards in the first place. We have yet to see what will happen with the economic climate as a whole in the months and years that follow. So right now, the most important thing is that we all get through this together and do what is right and best for us so that when we do emerge on the other side, we're in the best standing possible. If you enjoyed this video and believe it could benefit others, then please help me get it in front of more people by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. I'd also love to know if you guys are using credit cards or debit cards more during this time. And for those of you who are using credit, have you switched over to cashback or are you staying with travel points and miles? Whatever your situation is, let me know what you're doing in the comments below. I'll see you guys again soon, and remember, you are great.